First up, we have Black Sides with The Promised Land. This is the third album from the Chicago outfit, which sees the band pretty much have a full-on new lineup, but it is very revitalized through it all. This is some of the most inspired hard rock, heavy metal, and prog that I've heard in quite some time, especially this year. It feels like a grand mix of Baroness, King's X, Iron Maiden, and Led Zeppelin, all thrown together with some more modern touches, some more revival touches, and it just makes for a strange combination on paper, but something that works perfectly in execution. Add some excellent production and inspired songwriting, and anyone that's looking for something that's familiar but different in this world will find something to love about Black Sides. Give it a spin if it seems like this might be for you. Next up, we have Black Sun with their self-titled album. This is the fourth album from this Ecuadorian power metal band, but it is a gigantic change, as they switched out vocalists and now they have smackbound vocalist Netta Lorraine fronting the band, adding her signature blend of vocals that reach from the greatest of power metal to the raspy of hard rock, and that great sense of pop sensibility that she has as well. Adding on top of their signature blend of power metal has a fantastic style of production and songwriting that is so catchy from start to finish. It's so poppy, it's so power metal, it's so heavy metal, it's just easy listening power metal made for you. And if you like that style of melodic power metal, you need to give this one a shot. Up next is Bleed This Earth with The Shapes That Stood in Silence. 2024 has been a fantastic year for Doom, and this New Zealand band seems to be going after my heart with one of the saddest, most melodic funeral death doom albums I've heard in 2024. It's only 4 tracks, and the LP is just about 41 minutes long, but it is pure death doom, melodic doom, and funeral doom, all mixed together in a very tragic concept story that is sure to crush your soul. Add into that some of the most passionate musicianship and songwriting I've heard in these genres, and you have one of the best Doom albums of 2020, which is no easy feat to accomplish. If you are a fan of the slow, brooding, soul-draining, void-gazing styles of Doom, you need this album in your life. Up next is Fame on Fire with The Death Card, another third album I'm covering this week, and this time we're going to be focusing much more on the mainstream style of things. Well, in comparison to what I normally cover. I mean, look at what I just covered and watch what I'm going to be paying attention to next. This album is seriously the high water mark of this band's career so far, with some of the catchy songs I've heard in this style all year. It's just heavy enough, it's just poppy enough, it's a great combination of songwriting, and if this was on the radio where I live, and trust me it's not, I'd probably listen to more FM, and maybe in time it will be, at least it should be. But if you don't dig the modern sounds of heavy hard rock and heavy metal in this style, this will not be for you. For everyone else, this is one of the catchiest albums of mainstream rock and metal I've heard all year, with a fantastic thematic feel behind it all. Give this one a shot and see if you still like the mainstream side of things. Next up, we have God Dethroned with The Judas Paradox. 12 albums into this band's discography, and the band never stops innovating, going for a much rawer and especially a much more blackened territory this time around. God Dethroned feels more revitalized than ever before, and sadly, it did come from everything that happened out of the pandemic, but with those black clouds can lead to a silver lining sometimes, and it comes from the musicianship on this album, which is beyond stellar. The production feels right in line, that is just raw enough, just clear enough. Everything is going in the right direction with this album, and it's everything that you love about God Dethroned, just a little bit more on the blackened side. And if you want that, you need this. Up next, we have Helvet's Port with Warlords. And wouldn't you know it, this is another third album out today, but this time we're going into that classic metal, revival metal, new wave of British heavy metal sound. This is my first foray into the band, and it's been a delightful one. I hear so much inspiration from bands like Manila Road, I hear bands like Enforcer, I just hear that classic revival metal sound, but it also feels like an album that really did come out in 1981 that's just been unearthed in 2024. If that sounds like it's something for you, I couldn't recommend this one more. This is exactly how you do that revival metal sound with pure authenticity. Up next is Sidewalk Mafia with Soul Crushers, another Finnish band in 2024 putting out some fantastic music you're not going to hear anywhere else. Technically, this album did come out back on Tuesday, but I'm still counting it for today, you dig? Anyways, I checked out the band's debut album when that came out, and I covered it on this very channel, and I love their combination of stuff. This time, it feels like everything is going in the right direction with their combination of black metal, doom metal, and especially gothic metal. It's catchier, it's more refined, it's more what people might be into, and they've definitely improved so much since their debut album, which I already love that album. If you want a combination of black metal, gothic metal, and doom metal that is catchy but also sounds so underground, this is something that you really should give a shot, especially if this sounds intriguing to you in any sense. And finally, for brand new stuff out today, we have the brand new album from Wolfheart with Draconian Darkness. The band has put out 7 albums in 9 years, and have become one of the greatest Finnish melodeath bands, if not just one of the best melodeath bands on planet Earth. And this album is absolutely no exception. Whereas the band's previous album, they started to get a bit more mainstream, adding some clean vocals, adding a lot more catchy choruses. The band starts to go back a little bit darker on this album, while still maintaining the catchiness and the clean vocals of the previous album. It feels like a great mix of both sides of the band and where they're at in 2024. And no matter what era of the band you love, you'll find something to love about this album. And if this is your first time checking this band out, this is the perfect starter album because you'll know what direction to go into depending on the sides that you love. This is one of the finest melodeath bands of the 2010s, and they continue to just create the finest art of the melodeath genre. And now for the stuff that I've missed along the way, starting with the band Dawn Treader with Bloom and Decay. Post-black has been really few and far between this year. You've seen post-black with a lot of other subgenres, but never pure post-black this year. But when it's done right, it's been done magnificently, and this is no exception. The sophomore release from this one-man band from London captures everything I love about post-black, hitting the atmosphere, post-rock, the black metal, the occasional other influences, but this is a pure post-black album. It's as gorgeous as it is haunting, which is how it's supposed to be done. It also helps that this is an anti-fascist band, so anytime I come across that, it always gets my stamp of approval. This is an album I seriously can't stop listening to, because again, there hasn't been that much post-black this year, but I'm so glad this is one of the great exceptions of how you do this right. Give it a shot, you might feel the same way. Next up is Endless Chain with Agony. The sophomore release from this Finnish band is such a great combination of the Finnish genres that I love so very much, but done with such conviction and authenticity. You're not going to hear another band like this. It is progressive, it is gothic, it is melodeath, it just sounds so fantastic. It is so catchy, but it hits so many different influences that I love so very, very much. Imagine a dark mix of Paradise Lost, Sentenced, Amorphous, Insomnium, and To Die For, and you're gonna get closer to what this band is all about without giving everything away. This could be on FM rock radio if FM rock radio was better. Just kick back, relax, and enjoy this killer collection of rock, goth, prog, melodeath, all of it combined. It's a pure sleeper hit that should be a sleeper no longer. And finally today we end things with Python, with Wielder of the Steel. Now we're gonna end things with some nice, heavy, epic metal here from the UK, and this is a debut release as well, despite the fact that it feels like it literally came out in the early 80s. This is a band that you will love if you love the styles of Manila Road, Saxon, some Candlemass, and that classic heavy metal, epic doom metal, revival metal, new wave of British heavy metal, whatever your fancy. You're gonna find something to love here. It feels like an anthemic arena rock album. So epic, so heavy. I love everything about this. It's familiar and classic at the same time. I can't say enough good things about it. If this is your bag, you need to check this out immediately, and you'll be so glad that you did. First up, we have Flotsam and Jetsam with I Am the Weapon. This is the band's 16th studio album in 38 years, and that's quite the feat. But Flotsam and Jetsam has been one of the most consistent bands in the thrash genre to keep putting out albums every 2 to 3 years usually. But especially starting in the late 2000s into the 2010s, Flotsam and Jetsam really found their signature sound for what they would still be today, and I Am the Weapon is no exception. It's full throttle thrash with the occasional mid-tempo stomper, but never letting up on the intensity or the catchiness for that matter. Case in point, if you enjoyed the last several albums, you're gonna love this one. It has everything you're looking for with just the occasional twist to make it stand out from different albums. Check this one out, and you'll see that a band that's on their 40th year as a band is still rocking just as hard as when they made Doomsday for the Deceiver. Next up, we have Hellevorn with the Spectres. And if I pronounce that wrong, I am terribly sorry, but I really do want to show this album off in the best light, as it is one of the best melodic death doom albums of 2024. It's been 19 years since their debut LP, and they've only gotten better with age. Every subsequent album has been getting better than the next, and I can easily say this is the band's best album to date. It's that perfect blend of death doom, melodic death, and just the right amount of dark atmosphere in emotionally draining moments. It's exactly what you're looking for in melodic death doom. Adds some great dynamics and of course their authenticity behind it, and again, you have one of the best melodic death doom albums of 2024. Next up, we have Isolert with Wounds of Desolation. This Greek black metal band is back for their third album, and it's their most soul-ripping album to date. Their songwriting is that classic melodic black metal sound that I love so very much. If you dig the lights of Rotting Christ, Dissection, or even a band like Gorgoroth, you're gonna find something to appreciate here. It's pure black metal in its most authentic form, and the production style is raw yet very clear. I'm so glad that they didn't fall into the early 90s black metal tropes here, but add all of that combined with some great melody and harmony to make this stand out, and you have one fantastic mellow black album. Next up, we have Night Wraith with Divergence. When you think of melodeath and metal black, you mainly think of the coldest parts of Scandinavia, right? Usually Norway, Sweden, Finland. You don't normally think of Denver, but the third album from this Colorado outfit is some of the best mellow black and melodeath that I've heard this year, featuring past and present members of In the Company of Serpents, Primitive Man, and Ashen Horde. The band takes all of their influences and starts to add some other stuff that you wouldn't necessarily expect. You'll hear the likes of Dissection, Insomnium, even some November's Doom, and even some Nightingale. You combine all of that into a blender, you get one of the best mellow black, mellow death, and I dare say progressive doom metal albums of 2024. Might sound like a weird combination, but trust me, check this one out and you'll be pleasantly surprised. Next up, we have Trelldom with their return album, By the Shadows. Of all the bands to make their comeback in 2024, I did not expect Gall's avant-garde experimental black metal band to be that band. But when I listen to this, it really does feel like the band never left. Granted, it is updated just enough on the production side, and they have a new drummer in Kenneth Kapstad, but everything that you're looking for in this very unique style is here in spades. Gall does a magnificent job with the songwriting and everything that he's looking for in this style, and if you like this adventurous side of the band, it feels like Trelldom never left. I still advise going in with some caution, but if this sounds like it could be your bag, grab a goblet of wine, say Satan, and enjoy. Next, we got Victory with Circle of Life. Victory is back with their 12th album, and it's that signature blend of German melodic metal and heavy hard rock that you've always known them for over the past near 40 years. It's super catchy, the production is stellar, every song on this album feels like it should be heard in the live setting. It's the perfect soundtrack for having a good time. Put this thing on in a heavy themed party, and everyone will be singing along no matter the age. Sometimes you just need an album to help you escape the realities of life, despite the fact this album does cover the realities of life. But it's also the kind of album that'll put a smile on your face when you hear it. And if you need that smile, put this one on. And finally, for brand new stuff out today, it is Winterfelleth with what I consider to be the best atmospheric black metal album of 2024, The Imperious Horizon. Winterfelleth has never let me down, and after 4 years of waiting since their previous album, the band is back with their 8th and arguably their best album to date. Every time I spin this one, it just gets better. I hear more of the dynamics, I hear the layers every time being peeled back, and I'm able to enjoy this more and more from so many different levels. It's a very very dense album. When you peel back those layers though, it becomes one of the most rich and rewarding listening experiences in black metal in 2024. And of course, my biggest reason I love Winterfelleth is not just the songwriting, but the production style. Many bands of this style will go in a very raw, early 90s black metal feel. Winterfelleth makes sure that their albums are the most pristine that you can possibly hear them at. I love this album and it's going to rank so very, very high in my top 100. Check it out now and understand why. And now for everything I missed along the way, starting with the progressive rock band Anubis with their brand new album, The Unforgivable. This Australian band's 7th album in 15 years feels like it's the culmination of everything they've been working up to for this point. It's just a fantastic blend of prog, atmospheric rock, just the right amount of alternative, and such a great dynamic sound. Whether it gets whisper quiet or it gets bombastic, you will hear those dynamics and it will blow you away. My favorite aspect of this album is the vocal delivery, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the band don't have their moments to shine, as everyone does throughout this entire album. If you like indie, you like hard rock, radio rock, prog, alternative, all of that, you're gonna find something to really appreciate about this album, so give it a shot. Next up, we have the kings of instrumental post-rock, God is an Astronaut, with their brand new album, Embers. The band is back with their 12th album, and 22 years since that debut album, and Embers feels like it's some of the most inspired work that they've done to date. It feels like a new fire, well, no pun intended, but it feels like a new fire's been lit under the band for this one. The heavier sections are heavier, the arrangements are more fluid and interesting and full of left turns. It is more than worthy of the album title. When it gets hot, it's hot. When it dies down, it feels so subdued and chilling. And then when they do that left turn, it'll suck you in all over again. God is an Astronaut are the masters of post-rock for a reason, and Ember is here to prove in 2024 they are still at the top of their game. And if you've never checked out instrumental post-rock before, this might be the album that you should check out first to see if it's for you. Next up is the Hazy Tones with Wild Fever. And before I get into the interview, please go check out my mystery unboxing of this particular vinyl right here on the Heavy Debriefings YouTube channel. It should be the previous video that you see. But that said, this is some fantastic stoner rock, psychedelic rock, and hard rock, all the way from Quebec, and it's everything that I love in this genre. It's not just two notes droning on for over an hour, it's a dynamic, tempo-shifting, and attention-grabbing album. If you like the likes of Caius, Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, or even Alice in Chains, you're gonna find something to really appreciate about this album. 8 tracks, this is their 3rd album, a little bit of a new lineup, but from everything I've heard, this is some of the best work the band has done to date, and if you like that style, I recommend this. Next up is Jordan Rudess with Permission to Fly. Jordan Rudess is back with, depending on how you look at it, his 19th solo album, and it's some of the most prog yet palatable music he has ever done. I feel this is an album for prog heads and non-prog heads alike. 8 of the 9 tracks features a full-on band, and the final track is a very dreamy instrumental that feels like ending credits to the album. It's spacey, wanky in the right ways, but honestly, it kind of feels like if Haken did a Dream Theater album. And if that sounds intriguing to you, well, it's intriguing to me as well. And if you're looking for Jordan just to show off his chops, this won't be the album for you. But if you want to hear Jordan do some of his best songwriting and some of his best arrangements ever on a release, you need to check this one out. Next up, we have the band, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Outrere with Odyssey of Agony. This is a debut album from a German progressive doom band. That automatically has my attention. I love progressive doom, and there's not enough bands doing it. It's that perfect blend of death doom with the right amount of prog chops and keyboards that you don't necessarily see coming if you're going into this blind. As much as I hear bands like the Peaceful 3 on this, I also hear bands like Rapture or November's Doom on here. It's a little bit of a raw production style, but it's not unlistenable. It's just more raw than it is pristine. It has a great mid-90s feel behind it. It's cold, dark, embracing, and entrancing. The more I listen to it, the more I love it. And if you love death doom and you want to hear a little bit of prog mixed in just the right amount, this is an album you need in your life. Next up, we have Pure Reason Revolution with Coming Up to Consciousness. This is the band's 6th album in 18 years, including a sizable break in between all of that. They are back with their latest release, and the band continues to explore what the band can be. Of course, if you're looking for that alternative rock, indie rock, and electronic sound, that is here in spades, but they also get a bit heavier in the prog side as well too. There's some moments on this album that feels like Steven Wilson did this for Porcupine Tree or some of his early day solo work. dark, which I really appreciate. It's poppy and catchy. So much of this feels like it could fit on the dance floor. Even though it has some very existential lyrics behind all of it, it's as bright as it is dark. It feels like a conundrum, but it works so very well, and this is what you want from the band. If you want to hear one of the most dynamic albums the band has ever put out, this is that album. Next up is Together to the Stars with A Fragile Silence, and I'm going to say it right now. This is the best post-black metal album of 2024 so far, and it's not even close. Between all three albums from this band, I have loved what they've done, but the previous two were one-man band affairs. This one sees the band become a full lineup, and it really gives it a bit of an extra oomph to the band. There's new inspirations, there's new influences, the post moments hit so much harder, the black metal moments are a little bit fewer and farther between, but it is still very much a post-black metal album. Just a little bit more to it. For longtime post-black fans, you need to hear this one and see how it can be done in 2024. Once again, easily the best post-black metal album of 2024. Unless something happens to come out in October or November, I can't imagine any album pulling this off the mantle. And finally today we have the debut album from Timeless Fairy Tale with A Story to Tell. This is a debut neoclassical power metal album, something you did not hear much of in 2024, but I'm so glad it's done because it is a fantastic genre. Featuring past and present members of Royal Hunt, Darkened, and Stamina, this is a debut album that has that traditional power metal, that neoclassical feel behind it, and it feels so sophisticated and engaging. If you like the styles of Advance, Galerius, and yes, even Yngwie Malmsteen, you're gonna find something to really love and appreciate about this one. It's one of the most refreshing takes on the genre I've heard in a very long time, and with a genre that's very few and far between in 2024, if you like the genre, you need to give this a chance. You just may feel the same way. First up today, we have the debut album from Blighted Eye with Agony's Bespoke. This Seattle band has been around since 2019, but this is their very first LP, and it is everything that I love about progressive death metal, blackened death metal, all of that combined. You will hear elements of bands like Opeth and Rotting Christ, but the more that you listen, you'll start to hear moments of bands like Swallow the Sun or In Mourning, and you'll also start to hear some other bands and influences as well, if you love that sad, dark style that this form of blackened progressive death metal always brings. If you love emotional music that'll pull on your heartstrings, maybe even make you shed a tear, this is easily one of my favorite albums of 2024. And hey, John the Drummer, I'm reviewing your album. Next up is Eclipse with Megalomanium 2. Has there been a more consistent rock band in the 2010s and the 2020s than Eclipse? If there has, I'd love to hear them because, to me, Eclipse is the most consistent rock band of this era. It's one of Sweden's most prominent rock bands, and they've returned with their second album of the Megalomanium series. It also might be the last part, we'll see what happens, but this album is filled to brim with some of the catchiest rock songs, sing-along choruses, and the occasional left-of-center returns that I've heard all year. It's also just as catchy as the previous Megalomanium album from last year, but it's done just different enough to give it its own flair. It's the kind of album that you can put on, relax, have a big old smile to, and it makes you really want to go see them live. If this isn't your style, I understand why, but for everyone else, this is one of the best hard rock, AOR, melodic metal albums of 2024. They picked up right where they left off, and I can't wait to see what's next. Next up is Glacial Tomb with Lightless Expanse. I had no idea this was an offshoot of Chemist, and with their new lineup, it's even more Chemist than ever before. But don't mistake who's in the band for the style that they play. This is pure death metal, sludge metal, black metal. Hits some of the most extreme stuff that I've heard all year. Whether it's from the slow, sludgy tones that you can get, sometimes you can hear a little bit of Chemist in there, but it's just sludge. But then it goes into death metal assaults, the occasional black metal moments that spice. Next up, we have Groza with Nadir. And I've come to notice this week, at least the way that I put everything together, this seems to be a week of some of the best post-black all year. And it's been a very short year for post-black, but Groza is bringing it in strong this week as the first one I'm covering this week. This German band is on their third album, and they constantly just keep improving. They have been able to refine their sound to be able to focus on the darkest evil sides of black metal, metal, the very emotional sides that come with the post of it all, and just adding those left of center moments that really make everything tied together. It goes from great acoustic passages to full-on pummeling assaults. It's a roller coaster ride of emotions. Simply put, this is how I love post-black metal, and I'm so happy Groza's back in its strongest form to come back and make us all feel hollow inside. This is how it's done in some of the best post-black of 2024. Coming up next is an album and band that I'm going to have such a hard time pronunciating because I'm not very good at my German, so I do apologize if I get this wrong. It is Kennenfiver with Die Unkatastrophe. I really love this approach to this band. It is an offshoot that talks about the stories, storytelling, and interviews about the horrors of World War I, and the music more than captures the emotions lyrically, emotionally, everything about the horrors that come from World War I. The music is as chaotic as it is haunting, it's pushed to its fullest extremes, but it has those uneasy, almost melodic moments that gives off such dark feelings, which I truly appreciate. Whether you're a history buff, whether you love something that's very melodic and very extreme, this is more than worthy of your time. My words can only do so much to describe this album. You literally just have to sit back and experience it for yourself. You may enjoy it, you may not, but I think it's more than worth a shot. Next up is Krillin with Return of the Heralds. In this sophomore album, I love what Krillin has turned into. I absolutely loved their debut album a couple years back, and it's so great to see them back here with one of the most prominent and strongest power metal albums I've heard in 2024, and I mean that. They are set out to put out some of the most solid power metal you could ever hear. Everything you love about the genre is here, from the fast trademarks to the more subdued moments and everything in between. Krillin is the kind of band that should be playing prog power, and they deserve to be snatched up before the curtain calls on Prog Power USA. Maybe it'll happen in 2026. But seriously, this is some of the most exceptionally well-made power metal that I've heard this year, and if you just love your standard heavy power metal, no one does it like this. And what else could you possibly want from a band like Krillin? Next, we have Mork with Civ. 11 years and 7 albums to this Norwegian band's legacy is no easy feat to accomplish, but Mork has become more creative, engaging, and thought-provoking with every subsequent release. With this latest album, the band continues to experiment with their sound. Of course, they are always going to be layered in that classic old-school black metal sound, but you'll occasionally hear some psychedelic moments, some post moments, some avant-garde, some atmosphere, more extreme stuff, and a vocal delivery that will make any blood nearby curdle. That is some power. Thankfully, the album does have some fantastic production and doesn't fall into the traps of those second-wave black metal bands. If you're listening for the guitar, bass, drums, vocals, you can hear it and it's gonna sound great. If you want to hear a band that takes that early day black metal inspiration but adds their own spices and inspirations, Mork is that band, and you should check them out immediately. This is how you push the boundaries while sounding familiar. Up next is Vision Divine with Blood and Angels' Tears. Some more power metal coming your way, but this time it's from the Italian progressive power metal band known as Vision Divine. With the band's first post-pandemic album, and it's their 9th overall, the band continues to do everything that I love about power metal. It has the blazing fast riffs, it has the over-the-top keys and vocal performances. Everything sounds so crystal clear, and clearly everyone in the band is at the top of their absolute games. If you love bands like Rhapsody and Labyrinth, you need to hear this band because it is that full-on over-the-top power metal with just the right amount of prog attached to it. And sometimes that is all that you really need. Seriously, give this band a shot if you've never checked them out before. It is more than worth your time. And finally, we have the third album from Wings Denied with Just the Basics. This DC band is back with their most varied and experimental album to date. With their previous work, it has always been in that modern progressive metalcore, and alternative prog sound, but this time around, it feels like every single track is different from the other. Well, not completely. I mean, you're not going to get a grindcore song followed by a power pop song followed by Black and Polka or anything like that. It is all within the world of prog, but they write something in every style of prog, and it just feels so cool to see them do that, and it's so cool to hear that from start to finish. I hope this is the album that launches the band into the stratosphere because they deserve it at this point, and if you want a true showcase of what prog is all about, this is the album for you. And now it's time to catch up on all the music I missed along the way, starting with Agrippny with Erg. And wow, seeing the direction the band has gone through since I first discovered them back in 2013 is absolutely insane. When I think about 11 years ago, how much life has changed in the world, my world, your world, the band's world, the world amongst us, and just seeing what the band has turned into, they are one of, if not the best post-black band in the world. Their blend of post-black, experimental, prog, and other elements just write some of the most emotionally driven, progressive post-black that you're gonna hear in this style. It's some of the best riffs ever written for this genre. I've always loved what this band does, and just seeing how the band has progressed when I think about all those years back, 11 years ago, and just seeing what they're doing now, it shows that this band is here to stay, and they will stand the test of time. If you don't believe me, just check it out for yourself. What a phenomenal album in the black metal world. Next up, I got Deadscape with State of Decline. And I must thank the Harsh Vocals podcast for bringing this to my attention. Christian, Justin, thank you so very much. This has come to my attention as I feel it's one of the best melodeath albums of the year, and I don't say that lightly, as 2024 has been such an incredible year for melodeath. While I know the clean vocals won't be for everybody, they are for me. And this Bulgarian melodeath band's sophomore album takes everything that I love about the melodeath field and makes it a bit more ethereal, makes it hit just a bit harder with dynamics, and it has this overall sense of existentialism that I can very much relate to. 2024 for melodeath has been amazing, whether you're looking for more of the extreme side of melodeath or the more commercialized side of melodeath. This hits closer to the former, while still having some of the latter hit you very, very hard. Give it a spin or two, and you'll see what I mean. This is some killer stuff. Next up is Oceans of Slumber with Where Gods Fear to Speak. And this is a textbook definition of a polarizing album. What's my take on it? Well, I'd say that if you heard just the singles off this album, it is very reminiscent of the last couple albums that the band has done. If you listen to the album tracks off of this album, it is closer to the early day stuff that they used to do, that extreme progressive doom metal. And then they also mix it in with those singles that have that alternative metal, gothic metal, and the occasional progressive doom in there thrown in as well. Cami is putting out some of her best vocal deliveries to date. Dauber is one of the best songwriters in the world of metal. This is not an album you can hear once and say that it's their best or worst work to date. You have to listen to it a few times to really know, because I feel like some of this will click for you the more you hear it, but I would say above it all, this is their most dynamic, thought-provoking album to date. And for Oceans of Slumber, I expect nothing else. Next up is the legendary band known as Satan with Songs in Crimson. The band has been around for 41 years, but this is only their 7th album. Only the first 2 albums were released in the 80s and everything else has come out since the 2010s onwards. All that said, this particular album feels like it was recorded in the depths of 1984 and just unearthed this year for all of us to consume. From the production, the songwriting style, that overall sense of that classic heavy metal and new wave of British heavy metal sound that has hooked us for almost 50 years now is layered in this album. It's so catchy, hooky, everyone gets to shine. For almost 44.5 minutes, this is pure 80s heavy metal, classic metal, thrash, and haunting tones. If that's not for you, cool. For everyone else, this might be the album that you need in 2024. Kick back, relax, and enjoy. Up next is Tris Nodden with Black Swan. This is a new discovery for me, but I am floored. This is a nostalgia throwback for anyone of my particular era, of that 2000s melodeath, progressive, and alternative gothic metal sounds. Like, if you like bands like In Flames, Lacuna Coil, Deadlock, and yeah, I'll even dare say that first In This Moment album, you're gonna find something to really appreciate here. Every song is super, super catchy, and it feels like that alternative, gothic, progressive, melodic death metal that we all grew up on, especially in that middle era of In Flames. If FM radio was better, I could easily see this being on the radio, but you know they're not willing to take chances. Give this one a shot if you want that kind of throwback, but done in 2024. It's more than just a nostalgic feel, it really feels authentic. Just give it a shot and see for yourself. end things with Wesen with Abwesend. This is the first album I would ever dare call to be a melodic post-black metal album. This one-man Austrian post-black band is everything that I look for in the style, but it's done with such emotional riffs. It's not a cheery album in any sense of the word. This gives off emotional trauma and feels like what it deals with mental health issues, especially anxiety in particular. And as someone who deals with all of these feelings all the time, it can drain you, it can make you cry, it can make you feel things that you maybe don't want to feel, but it's one of the most cathartic feelings I've felt in an album all year. It also has a great production style that is very, very clear, but just raw enough to really drive home those feelings, and a display of musicianship that adds to it all. And you have one of the most sensational post-black metal albums of the ages. If you dig the style, you owe it to yourself to give this one a shot. This album proves that post-black is a genre worth exploring time and time again. First up, we have Adorior with Blood on My Teeth. This is the third album from this UK extreme blackened death metal band, and it's funny because the debut album came out in 98, and the sophomore album came out in 2015. Quite a bit of time, but sometimes you can't rush quality, and that's exactly what this album is. Imagine an unholy mix of goat whore, nun slaughter, possessed, morbid angel, and especially impiety, and you got one of the most intriguing extreme metal albums of the year, somehow still sounding like 1998 in 2024 at the same time. If you like the idea of a modern throwback like that, especially for extreme metal, you need to check this one out. You may just have to pick your jaw up off the floor after. Next up, we have the latest solo album from Anders Manga with Darker Than You Think. The latest LP from the Bloody Hammers frontman doing his passion project of gothic, horror-tinged synthwave is exactly what I love about this style. It's not heavy in the traditional sense, well, at least compared to something like Bloody Hammers, but it has the atmosphere, it has the lyrical content, and just the overall vibes that this release gives off is something that should garner attention from anyone who enjoys dark music. It's super catchy, full of great choruses that'll be stuck in your head for days, and a production style that fits like a glove. This is a perfect Halloween party album this year, so whether you're having a party or you just want to scare some kids doing trick-or-treating, put this one on. Regardless of all that, give this one a shot if this is something that you want to hear. I think it's some of the most authentic music I've heard all year. Next up, we have Awake the Dreamer with Halcyon. This sophomore album from the Swedish outfit is something that won't be for everyone that checks out my reviews, but it might be for you. Combining some of the most catchy and emotional moments of metalcore and post-hardcore in 2024, this band has pulled out an album that has pulled on my heartstrings ever since the first listen, and it has not stopped. You can hear the pain and anguish throughout this entire album while still writing some of the most catchy, melodic, and heavy metalcore riffs that I've heard this year, with stellar production and a sound that no matter where your rock and metal tendencies run, you'll find something to appreciate. This is a sleeper hit depending on who you are that rewards you the more that you listen to it. Whatever your reasoning, I think you should give this one a shot and see if it's for you. Next up is the Black Dahlia Murder with Servitude, and I don't know how I'm going to keep this under a minute, but I'll do my best. There's no way you can replace Trevor Sternad, there's just not, but the band has done such a magnificent job trying, and it really does feel like the Black Dahlia Murder 2.0. I love everything that's going on with this album. The entire band feels like they're at their absolute best here. Brian Eschbach is doing such an incredible job emulating Trevor but doing his own style, and having Ryan Knight back in the band doing his signature blend of guitar styling is just absolutely incredible. This album is everything you love about the band, updated just enough for 2024, barely a half hour at 32 minutes and change. It's everything that you love about the band, but just changing because of life and how it is. This is one of the best melodeath, mellow black, and American metal bands of 2024, and they put out one of the best albums when it comes to that. Rest in peace, Trevor. Next up, we have High Parasite with Forever We Burn. Guaranteed not to be the only time I mention this in this set, but I have to say it here. This is an album of the year contender. I love every single second of this album, and there doesn't feel like there was a single wasted second throughout any of this. Aaron Stainthorpe and Tombs have created such an amazing band here that is so goth rock, goth metal, rave inspired, Paradise Lost sense of production, which makes a lot of sense since Gregor McIntosh did mix, master, master and produce this album, writing some of the most dark, captivating, and catchiest songs that you're gonna hear this year. Referring to themselves as death pop, which is a label that truly fits, this is a debut album that I can't stop listening to, and easily one of my favorites of the year, which is totally why I say it's an album of the year contender. I am simply astounded by this album, and if you dig this style, you may just be as well. Next up is Our Hollow, Our Home with Hope and Hell. 5 albums into this UK outfit's career, and they have written some of the strongest material to date. It perfectly blends heavy riffs, catchy choruses, and it feels like a throwback to 2000s second wave metalcore or new wave of American heavy metal if you choose to call it that. This could easily hit you if you're looking for that nostalgia, but you want it updated just enough for 2024 and giving off some really FM hard rock radio vibes as well. And this should be on the radio if mainstream radio was better. Whatever your reasoning, if you like the idea of this, you should give this a proper listen and see if it's for you. It is heavy and mainstream at the same time. What a combination. Next up is Sirius Black with Rise of Akhenaten, and I hope I pronounced that right. This is a band that I fortunately got to see at Prog Power 2016. They put on such a killer show, but a lot has changed since then. It's 2024 now. Instead of just being that blazing power metal band that's super catchy, what are they doing now? Well, they kind of scale things back a little bit. It's just power metal enough, it's just hard rock enough, it's just melodic metal and AOR enough. It's this great combination of all of that together, and you have a super fun, catchy album that is suited for anyone who likes any of those sides. The songs are super catchy and memorable, and they feel like they were really written for the live setting, so maybe that'll mean more touring, maybe? It's a fun album from start to finish. If this is your bag, check it out and see if you agree. I know it's a little bit of a change, but I think it's been worth it. Next up, we have Torfy with the very fun title, Necronama Songs. This is the 4th release from this BC band, and wow, I love this so very, very much. There's not enough bands that are doing the blackened and progressive thrash metal. There's one band that I can think of that I really don't want to mention, but outside of that, there hasn't been something like this in quite a while. Imagine a band like Skeleton Witch meets Toxic Holocaust, mixing that wicked sense of prog, punk, and thrash that Voivod does. Mix it all together with a production style that feels so authentic to this music, and you have one of the best thrash metal albums of the year no matter the subgenre of thrash. This one took me by absolute surprise, and I love every second of it. You just might as well. Finally today, for stuff that came out today, is The Ring with Nemesis. This band is 9 years old, starting off as a solo project, but the band is now 4 albums in, and I really think they're starting to figure out what their sound is all about. It is as catchy as hard rock radio, but it can also get adventurous in some more jazz metal, progressive metal, almost dangerously getting close to progressive death metal at times. A way I look at it is, imagine a band like Watchtower, who really know how to mix that 80s pop feel while being very proggy, mixing that with Between the Buried and Me and Cynic. It is a dark sense of curiosity going out throughout this entire album, but it stays intriguing all the way through. If this sounds like anything that you could be into, I think you might enjoy it. It's very mesmerizing without being too wanky, all clean vocals, and it's not just about the fretboard Olympics. If it sounds like it's for you, seriously, give it a shot. Now for everything I missed along the way, starting with Avernus with Grievances. And this is 100% my kind of death doom. Funny enough, this is the band's sophomore album, and it only took 27 years since their debut album for this to come out. This has everything that you love about the Peaceville 3, but it's just a little bit more melodic and very devastating as well. It's some of the most melodic death metal that I've heard all year. And to those who think that this style is just one slow riff over and over again, think again. This will make you think differently of all of it. Every time I put this one on, it gut punches me with its emotional intensity, and that's why I love this genre so very, very much. It might have taken almost 3 decades, but I'm so happy to see this band is back and written one of the best death doom albums of 2024. I can't sell it any better than that. Up now, one of the most positive albums I've heard all year, it is Crimson Sun with Sorrowbreaker. The exact opposite of all the death doom and funeral doom that's coming up, Crimson Sun is back with one of the most positive albums I've heard all year, and it comes from Finland, so it's already breaking the stereotype that all Finnish metal is depressing. Crimson Sun's 3rd album feels like how melodic metal got its groove back celebration. It's so optimistic, it's so much fun, it can put a smile on your face if you let it. The music is just just on that edge of rock, metal, and pop that makes it accessible to everybody who checks it out. With how crummy of a year I've had, this album gives me a sense of, hey, I'm still here. And I didn't realize I needed something like that until this album came out. Just like Omnium Gatherum in Melodeath, Crimson Sun has done this for melodic metal, modern metal, and a little bit of AOR. And if you need that kind of optimism in your life, or you just want to hear some nice fun metal, give this one a shot. And now for something completely different. This is Crimson Veil with Hex. This is a debut album from a UK outfit that I didn't know I needed until it came out. This is a band that really hits some dark territories, but it gives it such a great grandiose feel behind all of it. It really does feel like a film score that you're listening to here. Imagine a mix of bands like Earthside, Disconnected Souls, and Long Distance Calling, and you're starting to get the idea of what the band is all about. There's still some stuff that they do otherwise that really makes them stand out. It really captures your interest from start to finish. It is the kind of album that you do need to experience like a full-on soundtrack. The more that you do that, the more rewarding the experience will be. I hope people catch on to this one because it is more than worth your time. And with an album that is this emotional, whimsical, and theatrical, it's also quite inspiring. Seriously, give it a shot. Next up, we have Deathless Void with the voluptuous Fire of Sin. Another debut album here, this time coming from the Netherlands. And this is just a pure, unadulterated, perfect look at black and death metal. Everything that you love from the early days of Gorgoroth and Behemoth, Vader, all of those great bands, you're going to be able to find something to appreciate with Deathless Void. It's that classic sound, but updated just enough to give it its own original feel. All kills and thrills, no spills. Simply put, this is how you make black and death metal exciting. And if you need that, and 2024 needs that, check it out and be in awe. Next up, we have Dreamless Veil with Every Limb of the Flood. Once again, another debut album, but this time coming from the US, and specifically from Dan and Mike of Artificial Brain. Instead of making their very technical, brutal, experimental death metal, they have created an otherworldly rendition of black metal that I haven't heard anyone else make something like this year, or possibly ever. It taps into the vein that makes my jaw drop upon the first listen when I hear something that's like this. It's brutal in black metal, but it also can get so emotional, and it just hits these kind of riffs that puts you into a sense of wonder I can simply not describe. You have to check it out for yourself. I love it when musicians are able to really show off their musical palette like this, and these guys have more than done that. If you're looking for one of the best black metal albums of 2024, check out Dreamless Veil. Next up is Excruciation with Pain. This is the 5th album from this Swedish death doom band that really gives me the most Tom G. Warrior vibes I've ever heard outside of something Tom G. Warrior's been a part of. I hear Hellhammer, I hear Celtic Frost, I hear Triptychon, I hear this and their own blend of brutal death doom mixed into all of it. It is pure Tom G. Warrior worship, but I'm totally okay with that because they add their own little mixes and spices to make it their own. If you miss this style of doom, and trust me, I do, I implore you to give this one a proper listen. You'll be so thankful that you did. Next up is For Falle with V. This is a Swedish post-black band, and I'm so glad to see post-black is really hitting Sweden now. Normally I just associate it with a band like Together to the Stars, but it's nice to hear this refreshing take on it as well. Even though it's just a sophomore album, it feels like a perfect counterbalance to Together with the Stars. It's harsher, darker, more atmospheric, hits some emotional beats that's kind of similar, but it is filled to the brim with dread. For many, this is the preferred style of post-black, and I totally understand why. It's especially that atmospheric style that adds intensity and emotion to the genre. It makes it feel a little bit sinister. I will admit the production is a bit hot, but I think it totally works in context. Other than that, this is a fantastic display of post-black, and I hope people will get into this. It's flown under the radar, but I hope that this review will help because this one needs to be heard. Next up is Heaven Ward with Demiurgic Forces. Before I get into it, you really gotta stop doing the band names and albums and stuff like that where you just take out all the nouns. It's enough. But that said, the creator of Unrequited has created a new project, and instead of going into the post-black realm, he goes into the depressive suicidal black metal route. And I love this. It is the perfect display of what DSBM is all about. There is one key thing to really note. He really does his best best Life Lover impersonation here. That is not going to be for everybody, but for those it is for, it is amazing. And for others, I totally get why it wouldn't be for you. Otherwise, this is some excellently produced DSBM which you don't always hear. Cold, dark, dreadful, everything that you could expect from one of the unsung heroes of black metal. Seriously, if you dig this, spread the word. This needs to be heard. Next up is Moonloop with Fate in Motion, and I feel so crappy for having missed this one. I completely missed the boat and did not even know this one came out. Thankfully, I did find it, and Moonloop has returned with some of their top work to date. The band is that perfect blend of progressive death metal and cosmic metal. Like, you can really hear the cynic influences throughout all of this one, especially on this album. But you will also hear the Opeth and Porcupine Tree stuff in here as well. You can also hear how a band like An Abstract Illusion is doing something similar to this, but, a bit different. It feels like that mid to late 90s through early to mid 2000s progressive death metal. And if you love that decade, you are gonna find something to really absolutely appreciate about this album, and go give Moonloop your attention. Next up is Oakmord with End of a Dream, and this sophomore album from this Finnish band is the quintessential literal definition of funeral doom. It is slow, brooding, heart-wrenching. It feels like you're being put in your grave, and dirt is slowly being buried on top of you. Of course, not everyone wants to hear something like that, but for people like me, it's exactly what I need. It's not an easy listen by any stretch of the imagination, but for fans of this genre, it is one of the most authentic funeral doom albums you are gonna hear. It will tear your soul apart in all the best ways. Take some time to give this album a proper listen and let those emotions flow through you. It's been a rough year. You deserve it. Next up is Toby Driver with Raven. I know you can give me anything. And Toby, I know you can write me anything. The man has written almost every single style of music out there. From the most extreme metal to jazz to acoustic, electronic, everything you could possibly imagine. This time around, he's returned to ballads. This is a very slow, ethereal, void-exploring side of Driver's music, and I love it so very much. It feels so relaxing, and it gives soothing emotions while being very vivid in lyrical concepts. Seriously, if you close your eyes and listen, you can envision everything that he's talking about. Well, even if this isn't for everyone reading this, and I totally understand why, I've always loved what Toby Driver has done. I love how experimental he can get, I love how subdued he can get, and everything in between. This carries that unique style, which people can try to imitate, but they will never duplicate. If you need a break from the heaviness of 2024, put this one on and drift away. And finally today is Unto Others with Never Never Land. And I wanted to cover this one last week, but unfortunately I don't get every promo ahead of time. That's what the What I Missed section is entirely for. That said, not only is this an Album of the Year contender, it could easily be Album of the Year, but it's a little too early to say that. But what I will say is I love absolutely every song on here, whether it gets into the goth territory, whether it gets into the metal side. They even do some crossover thrash, and there's some blast beats on this album. They've really expanded their musical palette. And if you check out the deluxe version, you hear a cover of Ramones' Pet Sematary, which is the perfect cover for the band. I know they don't like being called a goth band, but seriously, this is the goth album of the 2020s. No matter your style of music, you should give this one a spin and see if you don't fall in love. It's just that good.